Well, as we heard earlier, I learned about Dawn Johnson from Randa Blanding, who suggested her and sent me a copy of a link to her video, which I watched and said, bravo, we've got to get this lady here for summer skills. So Dawn agreed. And just so you know, those of you that didn't hear this earlier, Dawn is from California, and she is in a part of the state that has lots of heat and lots of smoke right now. So she is has been traveling on the Oregon coast, and right now she's in Gold Beach. So she's not that far away from us. So I think you read about Dawn's background with her Mariposa, California branch, and she served in many of the offices there. And she's with state AAUW. And they have an interesting concept there. They have a leadership development team. Sounds like a good idea to me. And she has been on membership committees and does other leadership things. But I'm also impressed with her private background, her work background, and has over 15 years of experience leading nonprofit boards and volunteer groups, which I think contributes greatly to what she's going to tell us tonight. She's had 10 years in marketing, training, and project management for her corporate life. So a very good background to be talking to us about volunteer management. Thank you so much, Dawn, for agreeing to do this while you're on vacation in Oregon. And let's take it away.
My pleasure. So we can go ahead with the title slide. So I was listening to the introduction and I'm like incredibly impressed with myself. I feel like an incredibly wonderful, powerful person. So I don't know who that was written about, but apparently it was me. I did do quite a bit of work in my branch, which is Mariposa, which is outside of Yosemite in California. And I rose really quickly in the ranks, like usually the way it works, which is that I volunteered to work on a yard sale. And within about 10 minutes, the people there noticed that I was extremely bossy and also that I was somehow capable of selling a broken 15-year-old microwave to somebody. So they said, this woman, needs to immediately be president of our branch. And so that's what happened, because you know how that works. So I played many roles and was president many times.
That's funny.
And then lately I've moved up to the state level where I have the pulse pounding a job of parliamentarian and governance chair. But my real work there is in communications committee, where I do most of the writing of all the materials that come out of our state, because I have a marketing background. And I also do a lot of strategic planning for our branches and for our state. That's an area that I'm have a bit of background in from my corporate work. So I kind of like to play around with strategic planning. So all of these things roll up into somehow ending up with me doing webinars. I don't know. Anyway, the question is, why am I in Oregon? And that was already sort of answered. Right now, our temperatures are 105 and 106 and smoky skies. So I thought we would escape to come up to your neck of the woods. And the first day and a half was great. It remained 106 and 107 all the way through Redding. And we couldn't even see Mount Shasta because there was so much smoke in the sky. And so I thought, I'm not accomplishing anything with this getaway yet. And then my dog vomited in the back seat. And I thought, this is doomed. This trip is doomed. But it has turned out really well. And I am loving your state. And I just came off of a boat ride on the Rogue River. And so that explains why I'm beet red, because not that I'm so embarrassed at speaking to you, but because I just came off a boat trip on the Rogue River and I got burned because your weather was beautiful today. So I've brought this glass of water so that I can fling water on myself throughout the evening so that I'll feel like I'm still on the boat and then I'll feel like I'm still on vacation. Also, it's very possible that this is filled with vodka, which I took from the minibar in order to relax on vacation. So you'll never know which this is. Okay. You want to know why? Another reason why I'm doing this is because you know how, the expression, the devil made me do it. Well, this is one of your state volunteers, Randa Blanding, with whom I work quite a bit on our communications in California, and she asked me to do it. So you can blame her if you don't like the evening. So let's go on to the next slide. So let's take a look at AAUW life before COVID. And I want to give you a scenario. Let's assume that you are holding an auction and it's a fundraiser, and you personally drove around that day and you picked up a heated foot bath massager from one place, and you picked up 4 iced tea glasses from another place, and then you picked up a food sealer, vacuum sealer from another place, because all these were going to be sold at the auction. And then you put them all in a box and you loaded your car, and then you printed out 100 copies of the auction brochure, and you spread them all out on your dining room table so that you could collate them and staple them, and you could put them in the box so that you could drive them to the auction venue at 8 o'clock in the morning and schlepping all of that. And you've probably all been there, right? And you're sitting there, and at that moment, it's about 10 o'clock at night, at that moment, your partner or your husband walks in and passively aggressively says, next slide, "Can't somebody else do that?" Are we going to go back to that? Probably. So second scenario. The second scenario is that you have sent out an email and you have asked for maybe for somebody to help you interview tech candidates or something like that. And you just sent out an email over there on the left, and it said, "We need volunteers. Can you help?" And the next morning, you said all these emails in your inbox, and you opened them all up, and you were extremely excited. And they said this: "I won't be able to help with anything this year. I'm teaching myself Latin. Gee, I'd love to help, but I'll be in Uganda. And then it's off to Machu Picchu." Or, "I'm sorry, but the grandkids will be here." Or, "I can help every other Monday between my 10:30 a.m. jazzercise class and my book group." Or, "I might be able to bring cookies, but I'm not really sure." Are we going to go back to that? Probably. Slide, please. So what are they saying? What they're really saying is, "I'd love to help, but blah, 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 blah. I want to enjoy my retirement. I don't want to be in charge of anything. I'm happy to leave it up to the vital few." The real message is, helping AAUW is not a priority to me. So that vital few is an actual sociological term for a group dynamic. And what it means is that 20% of the people do 80% of the work. Those are the vital few. 20% of the people do 80% of the work. It's a sociological axiom. So we are that 20%, the one who schlepped around the auction stuff. That's the 20%. And you and I that are sitting here on a lovely evening, well, it's lovely where I'm looking out at the ocean right now, doing this is because we're part of that 20%. So the best part of tonight is that you know that you have a title of power. You are the vital few, and we will go forth with that strength. So what I'm going to be talking about today is not as much how to get new members. That is not my topic. This is not about how to get members to join. It's not about how to go find that unicorn younger member that we're always looking for. It's not about how to write a better brochure. It's not about how do we reach out for diversity. It's not about that at all. What we're looking at tonight is how can we get the members that we already have to become active? How can we get them to take the next step and volunteer for our projects? So that's sort of our what we're targeting, and what we're talking about is the people we already have. And how do we get them to do something? Slide, please. So what we're going to looking at the overview here, we're going to look at 4 topics. We're going to look at how to find volunteers, how to ask volunteers, how to keep volunteers, and how to thank volunteers. And I'll try to remind you throughout where we are, because you may not know. There's so much information I have to give you. It's just going to go on and on and on. Okay, so starting with finding volunteers, where do we find them? So this slide obviously works a lot better when I'm in a workshop scenario, but you know, we're so good with Zoom now, you can do us anyway. So here's our little starter game. How can you find the pig, mule, rooster, tractor, hoe, and shovel? I will give you a moment. So don't slide the slide. And I admit that this is a little bit where Zoom fails us, you know, and my adorable segue is lost about finding things like volunteers or pigs, but we'll do it anyway. So I see people studying the screen. I wish I could see all of your faces, because I know that you're really, really looking for the rooster. Okay, slide, please. And there they are. Never let it be said that I left you unsatisfied tonight, because I found all your things for you. Did you at least find the pig? If only I could see your hands raised. But did you at least find the pig? And you're like, no, because you didn't tell me that the pig would be standing on its nose. So no, I didn't find the pig. But you might have found one of those items. And I will point out to you that the shovel, which gives people grief sometimes, as you can see it down there by the porch below the lady. You'll also notice that there's highlighted there 2 hoes. Now, in the answer sheet that I got from this, there was actually only 1 hoe, and that was the one up above the lady's head. However, I have used this little introduction before, and I've had many women and men challenge me that there were 2 hoes, and I am not going to argue with an AAUW woman who feels that she's been wronged. So I will always give credit for 2 hoes. Okay, next slide, please. So the question is, if you can find a pig, you can find a volunteer. So we just have to see where they're hiding, because they're hiding just like in that little picture. So where are they hiding? There's all these places. I'm going to talk about each one for a couple of minutes here. So we won't be switching slides for a minute or two. Where are they hiding? The first thing is they're doing the fun stuff. What do most of your people show up for? The fun stuff. They show up for the brunches, the lunches. They show up for the interest groups. They might show up for the yard sales. Most of them say, I just joined for the bridge group. And that's what they're showing up for. And why is that? It's because 2 reasons. One, it's because that's the social element. And secondly, because there's no pressure. There's no pressure to perform. You don't have to worry if the projector doesn't work. You don't have to worry if you don't have enough handouts. You don't have to worry, you know, if the lights go out. It's not your gig. And the social element is huge too. We are people. So we enjoy being around people. So we will be gravitated toward the activities that put us in touch with people. So we need to make the business of our branch more appealing and more non-threatening, so that people aren't afraid and they don't feel as pressured to do these things. So one thing you want to do is to want to build social networking into your work as much as you possibly can. So that means you constantly want to get 2 people together to do 1 job, or 5 people together to do 1 job, whatever it takes. So we very much encourage job sharing. We very much encourage that if you have a little task to do and you know it only takes 1 person to do it, have 2 people do it. Why? Because they will feed off each other and they will develop a little social interaction, and that's what they're looking for. And then the job gets done miraculously at the same time. I had an experience last weekend. We have a program where we give out backpacks to needy kids in our town. It's my local branch. And we had done a big giveaway and we had 10 backpacks left over. So they set up another giveaway of 10 backpacks. And we had 4 volunteers to give away 10 backpacks. So what happened? We were really bored because we gave them away in a second. And then B, we started talking. And when we started talking, what we talked about was we didn't like the way they handled the backpack giveaway, and we're going to change it next year. So we ended up volunteering to work on it and make it better next year. I wouldn't have done that if I'd been there alone at that event. So always, 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 get more people to do it, even if the job seems simple. Try to make all of your activities as much as informal as possible. You don't need to make everything a committee meeting with an agenda. Sometimes it's just a gab session, get together, planning party, not a committee meeting. You want to bring your leader teams together as much as you can to give them that social element as well. You all probably have interest group chairs. Maybe you call them sections. I don't know what you all call them. We call them interest groups. And they all have a chair. And those chairs are like mavericks. You never see them. They're off running the book club and the film group and the bridge club and the whatever your sections are. And you never see them. And they're sort of wandering around out there. They never see each other. So you should have regular meetings of your interest group chairs. If you can get them together once a month, that's awesome. Every 2 months, just to share some information about what's going on with their groups, make sure they have common practices. Are some of them taking attendance or not? Is one of them writing an article for the newsletter or not? Do they rotate that responsibility? How are they handling it? Set up some common practices, share stories, keep them involved with each other, because that breeds that social element you're looking for, and that breeds a synergy that tends to end up breeding more participation in the actual work that you need to do. And when you bring your also bring your project chairs together regularly. Bring your speech track chair and your tech track chair and your STEM camp chair and your scholarship chair, just your chairs. Bring them together regularly for just a meeting just for them, because they'll develop synergies amongst themselves. They'll share resources. You'll have your speech track person who'll say, I know an awesome videographer who's going to record my speeches. And then your scholarship chair says, oh, it'd be so cool if I could film my kids getting the scholarship certificates. And they share the resources. And that all breeds that. It just bubbles up that synergy. So we want to try to so that's kind of like how to make it a little bit more fun, is to develop that social aspect of it. Okay, the next thing is, where are they hiding? They're waiting in the wings for something new. We get really bored. We do the same projects, the same programs over and over and over again. And when someone takes over a project, what do they get? They get a 5-inch 3-ring binder with pages and pages and pages and pages of how stuff is done. And it stifles their own creativity. So we need to create new opportunities. You need to be looking for new projects and new programs. It's a case of build it and they will come. New projects beget new volunteers. New projects beget new volunteers. Now in California, we run a competition, if you will, an award program. And we ask branches to submit programs that they're doing or projects that they're doing that are shareable, that are doable, that are easy to run, that are mission-based and that engage a lot of volunteers. And we have a contest and award the top 3 according to criteria that we have. And then we put all of those projects out on the website so every other branch can look at them. And some of these projects were submitted are amazing. There's projects for finding shoes for homeless people. There's projects for doing a coloring book for Women's History Week, all kinds of interesting projects that branches were doing. And the criteria for being awarded the prize was that you had to make it very shareable. You had to be willing to teach another branch how to do it. So if you can get opportunities to go find other projects that you can do that you've never done before. Because if you let people start something new, if you let them own it, they'll run it. And that's what you want. Next is, the reason they're hiding your volunteers is that they were told they didn't have to do anything. This bugs me more than anything else. How many times have you heard someone say, please, Oh, please join our branch of AAUW. Don't worry, you won't have to do anything. Your dues are enough. I have a lot of feelings about that. I agree that we want their dues, but I think when you set up an expectation, when you invite someone to join your organization, and you set up an expectation that they don't have to do anything, then they're not going to do anything. And then we shouldn't be complaining about not being able to find volunteers, because we have not made it an expectation of membership. So I think there is a place for your members who can only pay dues and can't participate. There's a place for them. There is. But I don't think we should lead off with it. And I see too many times, I hear membership folks leading off with that statement just to get a name on the rolls. And I think that then, again, you're not finding volunteers there, are you? You're actually, it's counterproductive. So where's the other place? They're in your interest groups. That's where your volunteers are hiding. They're in your interest groups. So you need to find them where they're playing. And you need to start leveraging those groups a little bit more. I think sometimes our interest groups or sections, I think they need to pay to play a little bit more. I think they need to be a little more engaged with some expectations on them. So you can ask your interest groups, for example, to do some work that's a little more tied into the mission. You can ask your interest groups to each be responsible for hosting one of your programs. You can ask them to do one service through the year that's related to their theme, that's related to your mission, to do one service project that's related to their theme and their mission. For example, your book club, you could ask them to be responsible for editing all of your written communications for that month. You can ask them to write or edit your new brochure. You can ask your garden club to plant some flowers at the local hospital. You can ask your bridge group to maybe teach card games to kids in a homeless shelter. You set an expectation that your group is also to find something it can do that plays off your mission and that supports your mission and gets them engaged. So you should also have your interest group chairs come to your board meetings and your leadership meetings all the time, and because they will hear about things that excite them, and they will probably end up volunteering because they get excited. But if they're isolated and running like mavericks on the side parallel to your board work, they don't see an opportunity to get involved with it. So you want to pull them in much more and leverage them more, because that's where your people are hiding. Okay, where else are they hiding? A lot of it is that they're just not plugged in. How many times have you run into someone who said, oh, there was a program last week. There was a speaker. We had an event where we gave away some backpacks to kids. I didn't know about that. I didn't know about that. And you're like, oh my God, didn't you see it in the newsletter or our website or our Facebook page, or didn't you get the email or the invite, or what do we have to do to get you to listen to us? And they always have all these excuses for why they didn't know about this event, why they just weren't plugged into this event. They don't drive at night. They're too busy with something else. They didn't read the newsletter, because only 30% of your people read the newsletter if you study your clicks. They don't do any of that Facebook stuff. They only check their emails on Sundays. And that's like only when there's a full moon. That's when they check their email. So that's why they missed it. They always use the T&G excuse, travel and grandkids. So there's always a lot of excuses why they're not plugged in. So all of these situations here on this page are missed opportunities to find new volunteers. So what should you do? Slide, please. You should get in their faces. So the rule of 7 here is an old, well-known marketing axiom. The rule of 7 is that you need to tell someone 7 times for them to remember something. 7 times. There's a program on diversity tomorrow night. There's a program on diversity tomorrow night. There's a program on diversity tomorrow night. There's a program on diversity tomorrow, blah, 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 blah. You need to tell them 7 times. And not only 7 times, but you need to tell them different ways. People hear things differently. People learn differently. Some will get the information by reading your newsletter. Some will get it by word of mouth. Some will get it by a flyer. Some will get it by a phone call. So you need to be firing on all cylinders, because if you are just trying to reach people through your newsletter, for example, you're not engaging everybody, because everybody picks up the information from you in a different way. So you need to be employing all of those tools. And if you're not, there's that hidden pool of volunteers that are sitting out there that aren't getting your message. And that's unfortunately on you. I think most likely, I'm going to guess that you all know the routine ways to reach your members. And I'm not going to focus on that tonight, because that's a whole nother workshop that I do. That's a whole nother workshop that I do. But this one is so I know that you know about your newsletter. I know you know about blast emails. I know you know about using your website. I know you know about using your social media. You might even have tried some printed mailings, old school stuff, which has a surprisingly good result. You might even have experimented with using Evite or Eventbrite or Nextdoor or LinkedIn. You might have even experimented with using QR codes on some of your mailings. So I know that you know those basic ones. So tonight, all I want to do is tease you a second. I want to mention 2 ways you might not have thought of that you can use to get in their faces and stir them up down there. So I'm going to tell you about 2. So next slide, please. The first one, this is a shocker, robocalls. And you're like, no, our members will never, no. And I'm here to tell you, yes. Okay, we use a cheap service called PhoneVite, and that's phonevite.com. And it is a great way to get in touch with all of your members cheaply. It's an internet-based voice broadcasting service. It's 5 cents a call. So that means it costs you $5 to reach 100 members. And you reach all your message with one message, and it's the same message. And this is a great tool for your non-email checking, non-newsletter reading, non-computer loving, need lots of reminders, and still love their landline members. This is a great one for them. It is easy to use. The website walks you right through it. I can even do it. I'm really not techie. It is easy. You make a quick voice recording of your message, and you hit a button and you tell it what time you want it to call everybody, and it places the call. You just make a charming and delightful and utterly wonderful short message that everyone hears. It's crystal clear. They actually think that it's you when they pick up the phone. We've used this for years, and we have had 2 people ask not to be called, which is an easy thing to erase from the file. So I highly recommend it. A different way to reach your numbers. The second thing you might try that you may not have thought of besides robocalls is what we call the branch buzz. And this is another way to sneak into your interest groups and find those volunteers that are hiding there. Next slide, please. I'll show you what this is. So here's an example. So what we do is your leadership team or your board once a month puts out a communication to your interest group chairs. This just goes to your interest group chairs, not to your members, just to your chairs. And what you ask them to do each month when they have their meeting with their bridge group or their book club or their great decisions group or their movie group, they are asked to read these 3 bullets at the beginning of their monthly meeting. And in these bullets, you do 3 things. The first bullet should be something celebratory, something good that's happened, something that's really, noteworthy. And then the second one is something that you are asking them to do, or informing an upcoming event, let's say. The second one is something that's coming up. The third one is the one we're most interested in tonight, is where you might request some volunteer help for something. So the first one is to celebrate something or tell something noteworthy that's happened, that's good news. The second one is to tell people about something that's coming up. And the third one is to ask for some help on something that you might need. And so the interest group chair receives this in an email from someone on your board. And this is an excellent thing that you can rotate as a responsibility among your board members. And then and they read it at the beginning. It communicates information that I guarantee you a lot of people in those interest groups are not getting any other way. We found our interest group chairs look forward to getting it. They're very happy to start their first meeting with that each month. And when you ask in the third one, when you ask people for something volunteer in the third bullet, you want to make that extremely clear in what you're asking them to do. So here we said how many hours they would have to volunteer and what they're being expected to do, to score student essays for 2 hours. We don't just say we need people to help with Tech Trek. I'll talk about that more a little bit later. Okay, next slide, please. Gotta talk faster. Okay, we're on part 2. So that whole first part was like finding those volunteers. So now now that you've found them, now the next thing is to ask them. Part 2 is volunteers, asking them. How do we ask them? So probably most of you have a pretty good system for asking people to volunteer. You certainly use your normal communication methods that we already talked about. You also probably use the personal ask, and we know the personal ask is always the most powerful. And usually that starts off with you saying to someone, I wonder if you would meet me for a cup of coffee sometime, and maybe we could get together for a cup of coffee sometime. And that asking people for have a cup of coffee with you is the secret code. And that's the secret code for, I'm going to ask you to do something. And most people, they hear the cup of coffee request. And I mean, you could escalate to a glass of wine, or in my case, a vodka martini with olives. But for the most people, it's a cup of coffee, and people know what that means. And they usually say, I'm really busy. I don't think I can do that, because they know that you're going to ask them for something. So it works. It's good. It's strong if it works, but it might not work. So we're going to talk about some other things besides the coffee code. And the first thing is that when we're asking people, we need to change the ask. We need to change the ask. We need to think about this differently. And that's summarized in the first bullet. Ask not what you can do for AAUW. Ask what AAUW can do for you. Ask not what you can do for AAUW. Ask what AAUW can do for you. We need to think in terms of what the volunteer needs instead of always what AAUW needs. Because the modern volunteer, their mantra is WIIFM, which is what's in it for me. What's in it for me? In California, we hired a marketing consulting firm last year to analyze for us the potential new markets for membership recruitment. And one of the things they came back with so strongly was we need to prove to the volunteer, well, this is in the case of asking for members, but it's the same for volunteers. What are you going to get out of it? How are you going to be rewarded out of this? We have to stop thinking this is a one-way street, because times have changed. So we always want to pitch, how is this going to help them? So we want to get and we also want to make it not so vague, like you'll be empowering women and girls. It's just too vague. So we need to drill that down into saying, How is this an opportunity for personal or professional, especially if you are going for, you have younger people that you're working with? How is this good for personal or professional growth? So you say, this is going to be a great way for you to learn public speaking. This is going to be a great way for you to learn how to manage a project. This is going to be a great way for you to learn how to write a press release, or maybe how to learn how to use Excel, or maybe how to learn how to work on a website with an easy crowd. We're an easy crowd. This is a forgiving crowd. This is not a paid work environment. People can make mistakes. So it's a learning opportunity we want to offer people. I'll give you an example of this. I got real snookered with this one. That's why I love it so much. This came from my own daughter-in-law. So she and her husband wanted to get away for a weekend, and they wanted us to come and babysit the littles. So I don't know, intuitively, she's so smart. She didn't call me up and say, hey, Dawn, could you, we want to get away. Could you babysit the kids for the weekend? She called me up and literally she said, the kids really miss you. You can't believe it. Abby lost her first tooth. She looks so cute with it. She talks funny. You haven't had a chance to hug them for a couple of weeks. They just learned how to ride their new bike, and you're going to watch it. It's so fun. And, when we're around, you just don't get as much chance to play with the kids because you're talking to us all the time. You don't get that quality time with them. And I fell for it. I'm like, you're right. This is going to serve me. I am going to get something out of this because I'm going to have a wonderful weekend with these kids. And so of course I did it. I would have done it anyway, but I don't know. It proves my point. The next one is you want to match opportunities with interests and skills. It really helps if you do your homework. If you're working with someone that you'd like to volunteer on something, it really kind of helps to know what they did in their former life or are doing in their current life. So if they were an accountant or something, and you want to, you really want to try to put them in a job where they can work, where they can use their skills beneficially. We also need to work a lot more on offering virtual volunteer opportunities. We're a little bit old school. We're still asking people to set up tables and chairs, right? And carry boxes and go get auction items and, beg for donations from Walgreens for money and, those sorts of things. We have to always be looking at how can we also create volunteer virtual opportunities. And I mean by that, something that someone can do at 1 o'clock in the morning on their computer, because there are a lot of people that work that way and they prefer to work that way. And so when you are planning a project or an event, you have to look at, all right, we're going to need certain people that are there in the trenches on the ground, but what kinds of things could be done remotely that we need to make very evident to people so they see that opportunity for themselves. We often forget that and we don't offer it, and then the people don't do it. The next one is be truthful. So when you're asking a volunteer, you need to be truthful. I mean, we need to really be very clear, state what the task is that needs to be done, what are the skills that are needed, what's the time commitment, so that people can volunteer where they feel effective. So don't just ask someone to help with the newsletter. You want to ask them, we need someone to put the events in our calendar. It'll take you 1 hour a week and we'll show you how to do it. But if you just say, we need help with the newsletter, please be on the newsletter committee or sign up for newsletter work, you're not going to get them. But if you tell them you're going to do 2 hours a week, we're going to show you how to do it, this is exactly what you're going to do, you're going to have more chance of getting somebody who is able to do it. Next is to drill it down. And that just means parse big jobs into small ones as much as you possibly can. Chop up the work. So again, it's kind of the same thing in presenting jobs or opportunities in terms of short time commitments, which means that you ask in terms of hours. So instead of saying, help with the yard sale, you want to say, can you do a 2-hour shift at the yard sale on Saturday from 2 to 4 or from 4 to 6? Because we're using the money to we're raising money for scholarships. Because it's very important that you always tell people why you're asking them to do this work. Always. So in your newsletter, you can drill this down by running little help wanted ads in your newsletter. So the one that we had running for our yard sale, I just pulled up and it was like, help wanted. Talk people into buying useless stuff for 2 hours. Fun, talkative people only need apply. Chance to buy back someone else's useless stuff. 2 openings, Saturday, 10 to 12 or 4 to 6. So it kind of makes it engaging, and it also tells people exactly what you're asking of them and how long, what their time commitment's going to be. Next is stop begging and assume the sale. So we should have an expectation that our members care about our branch's work and that they want to volunteer. That we should have an expectation that this is a two-way street, that it's not just good for us, but that it's good for them. So we shouldn't have to beg because we are giving them something of value. And if you cling to that idea that you're giving them something of value too, you don't have to be begging as much. And we need to assume the sale, which is also using the presumptive close. Any of you in sales know the presumptive close. So you want to change the message to say, can you spare a few hours to help at our yard sale? Pretty, please. And you want to say instead, I have 4 time slots. Which one works for you? Assuming they will volunteer. Next is don't cater to the lifers. We've got to stop chasing the old timers. We have to put our energy toward the ones who are young and engaged, more available, more enthusiastic. I shouldn't have said young because actually that's not necessarily the youngest person at all. But you'd be thinking if you're always having your meetings to plan projects and to train volunteers or whatever at 4 o'clock because people can't drive at night, I think you need to rethink that philosophy. Okay, the next one is to make a volunteer value promise. It's the same thing I've sort of been preaching all along. We want the volunteers to understand what they'll be getting out of this instead of always the other way around. So if you think about your brochures, I'll bet if you look at your brochure now, if you have one, it basically tells people what AAUW does. We have a STEM camp and we have a scholarship program and so on. It often doesn't have a section where it tells what AAW does for you, the member. What are the member benefits that you can get by joining? I'll give you an example on the next slide, please. So this is something that you can slip into your marketing materials if you want. This is a volunteer value promise. By volunteering in the Mariposa branch of AAUW, you will what? What are all the things that are going to happen to you when you volunteer? And it should be very specific. You're going to make a difference in Mariposa by doing what? What are the things that you do that make a difference? You'll network and you'll learn from how many like-minded people who also live there. And what are some of their jobs? Who are you going to be mixing with? Who will your peeps be if you join? These sound like cool people. I want to know teachers and artists and realtors and software engineers and doctors and lawyers and Indian chiefs. I want to know all those people. You're telling them they'll practice their skills. Maybe they'll learn new ones. You're telling them they can socialize and network with other organizations, et cetera, et cetera. So that's something you might consider incorporating in your materials about your branch to make people see how that's going to benefit them. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, believe it or not, we're still on this whole topic of asking the volunteers. We're still in the second part of asking. We found them in the farmlands there, and we've asked them in many different ways. And now we get to one more stage, which is what we want to ask them to step up a little bit higher. And this is take me to your leader. So the good news is that you found the volunteers and you've asked the volunteers. But the bad news is that nobody wants to be the leader. So we get this. We all understand this. I work with someone else. We do a lot of things at branches. We know we understand the whole musical chair thing that's going on. We understand the leadership vacuums that branches are struggling with. And unfortunately, we don't have a lot of silver bullets, but I'm going to give you a few ideas for how to get people to step up to the next position of leadership where I'm running low on time. Slide, please. So again, there's no real silver bullets, but I'm going to give you about 4 or 5 different things you might think about doing. First, and I think you probably already know about this, but you can restructure your board. I won't spend a lot of time on this because I think you already know. You know that you only need 2 or 3 elected positions. By your affiliate agreement, you only need 2, an administrator and a finance officer. Some people think you also need a third, a secretary. And that may be true if you're incorporated, but if you're not, you're not required by national. So what does that mean? That's good, because then it's one less position to recruit for. And also means that for that secretarial role, which you actually do want, but you're not required to have, but you do want it, maybe that's a great place where you can rotate through your interest group chairs to be secretary of the month or something. You want to think about restructuring by building a leadership team with directors at large. Directors at large, instead of assigning people to be a VP of membership, VP of programs, VP of fundraising, VP of fund, all of those things, just have your 2 main required positions, and the rest of them are directors at large, which means they float and they work where they're needed, on what is needed, on projects that ebb and flow, projects that have time limits, so that they don't feel this horrible commitment. I have to do membership for an entire year or 2 years. Instead, it's like you're a director at large. When we need you for a membership project, you could float to that. When we need you for a fundraising project, you can float to that. It gives your directors more flexibility and less sense of this onerous, burden of commitment. So I think it helps people feel more comfortable about stepping up to a board position if they're all directors at large. Next is to parse your big jobs into smaller ones. I think you know about that as well, and encourage job sharing at all your leadership positions. And one of the keys to making that work is to have a chart of responsibilities. So if you sit down with the person with whom you're going to share the job, the first thing to do is write down everything that that job has to do, and just really spend a lot of time on it. Write everything that has to be done, and then say, you do this and I'll do this. You do this and I'll do this. And you do this and I'll do this. Because when the responsibilities are clearly understood, it's just much easier to do the work than if it's that floating, we're sharing the job, but we don't know who's actually doing what. So be sure you have a chart of responsibilities. You can restructure your board by maybe doing shorter term limits. I don't know what your are. There's nothing that says a term limit has to be a year or 2 years. You can even have term limits in terms of months. Make them shorter. We're just trying to make this less scary. Be ruthless about reducing responsibilities. Does your president really have to write a newsletter article every single month? Really, does that have to happen? If you look at responsibilities that are burdening your leaders, get rid of them. Speaking of getting rid of things, let's look at the next one, dump the binder. When you have your VP of membership and you hand them a 40-page binder and it has 18 pages on, let's say your treasurer, and it has 18 pages on how to deposit a check, it's like, no. So spend some time doing a 1-page job description. Just make things less scary and less threatening. Okay, next slide, please. What else could you do to get your volunteers more likely to become leaders? Use task forces more. They're finite. They have a short period of time. They're easier for someone to sign up to be on a task force. So you could have a task force that just says, we're going to rewrite our brochure and write some marketing materials. That's all this task force is going to do. You can sign up for it, you do it, you work on it, and then you get out of it. The other thing I heard it from another branch I stole, is this thing called form a branch blue ribbon committee. This is a thinly disguised bait and switch. What you do is you invite people that you know are movers and shakers, that you know are people who can get things done, people that you want to be leaders in your branch. And you also know that those are the people that are most likely to say no, because they're generally pretty busy people, because they're doers and they're movers and shakers. That's why you want them. So what you do is you invite them to an informal luncheon. No agenda, no recruitment. You say, look, I'm not going to ask you to do anything. We just want to talk about the branch. And next year, we just want to talk a little bit about the branch's opportunities and the challenges. And, do you know anybody that could help us with some of these things that we'd like to do? Or, what do you see as being our best programs, or the programs maybe we could add? And just have this whole chat session. You're not asking them to do anything, but you know what will happen, because these are the people who make things happen. So the juices will flow, the synergies will form, and your leaders will bubble up. When those people sit around, when people like that, talented people sit in a room together, they decide to run things. They bubble up and they take over because they get excited and they get energized. So that's my bait and switch. So you say, hey, you're part of our blue ribbon committee. Okay, if you're feeling really bold and about getting your leadership recruitment going a little bit, another thing you could think about is to put your sacred cows out to pasture. This is a tough one. You need to take a hard look at everything that you do in your branch, and you need to have a garage sale. So sometimes you need to get rid of stuff that you can't get it done because you don't have the leaders to do it. So you don't do it. That does, instead of you stepping in to do it, because we're part of the vital few, so we always step in to do these things, it's not going to be done. It's important for people to understand that if no one volunteers to be in charge of something, it means that it must not be important. And if it's not important, it won't get done. And that's a hard one. A colleague that I did this presentation with the other day said that she had a case where a branch had this STEM camp, and they couldn't get anybody to run it. So they didn't do it. Well, the next year, people were moaning and groaning, the members like, I didn't do the STEM camp. And the whole community was so upset. We didn't do the STEM camp, and this branch president said, nobody volunteered to do it. So we didn't do it. So they got 3 volunteers to run it the next year. So sometimes when you put it out to pasture, your members will bring it back in because they'll realize it was of value. Sometimes you got to kick them in the butt. You can also hand off a project to another organization. If you can't do it anymore and you can't find someone to do it, get rid of it, but give it to someone else. We had a project we did in my branch where we used to hand out, when kids turned 18 in high school, we'd hand them an envelope with the voting registration information and a pizza certificate or something if they filled out the registration slip, and information on your rights as a citizen. And, we did all that, and our members made all those packages and put them away. And one year, the person who'd been doing it for approximately every year since the Civil War, I think, didn't want to do it anymore, surprisingly, and nobody did it. And so we stopped it, but we handed it off to a legal aid society organization in town, and they took it over. So it doesn't mean it'll die necessarily. It just means maybe it's not a fit for you right now, or that you've outgrown that project. Delegate some responsibilities to the interest groups. I think we talked about that. Let them take some more of an active role in the leadership of the branch. Expect them to take more of an active role in the leadership branch. And last, don't do it if no one wants to. And last, if all else fails, think about merging your branch. If you can't get leaders on yours, think about merging. Next, please. I can get through the rest of this pretty quickly, I believe. If everybody will give me 5 or 10 more minutes, I will. The third part, we found them, we asked them then to be leaders, but now we're on, we've got volunteers. So now how do we keep them? How do we keep them on task? How do we keep them working? So the first thing about that is to be a lot more business-like. I think we need to understand that our work is important. Our work is impactful. Our work is image building. And so I think we need to run it like a business. It is a business. We should run it like a business. And part of that means being very honest about the requirements of the opportunity, because one thing that it's nice to soften the word and start calling it an opportunity for the volunteer to learn and grow, and not just a job. So you want to be really honest about the requirements. When I first joined my branch, they said, "Oh, do you want to be a coach for speech trek?" And I said, okay. And the person who was running speech trek said, "Yeah, just be a coach, just help them with their speeches." And I said, "Well, like specifically, what should I do? And tell me more about this." And they said, "No, just like a coach, just be a coach, just help them with their speeches." So that did not inspire me as a volunteer, because I didn't understand my task. So I think it's really important. You have to tell people exactly what you're going to be asking them to do. In the case of speech trek, it's like, oh, your student's going to write a 5-minute speech. You're going to help with editing. You're going to help them with their delivery. You're going to spend 2 hours a week with them. You're going to listen to one presentation, something like that. If people know what's expected of them, they perform better. If they know what's expected of them, they perform better. So next is hold people accountable. You need to ask for reports. You need to ask for people to have a project plan. You need to ask for people to have timelines so that you can sort of tactfully monitor them. I think what's critical about this is that if you hold people accountable, you're telling them that they have value. I mean, that's really important. If you hold them accountable, you're telling them they have value. You're telling them, we can't do this without you. We can't do this if you don't do your part. We can't do this thing. So you're very valuable to us. We need you. That's the greatest motivator to a volunteer that they can hear, is that you really needed you. I took a volunteer assignment tutoring in my local community. I showed up to tutor. There was no sign in, no sign out. They never had any idea if I was coming or not coming. I skipped 3 weeks. Nobody checked with me. Nobody cared. I had a rotating list of students every week. I never knew who I was going to be tutoring. I was never handed any curriculum plan. They just said, go tutor the kid. So guess what happened? I quit because I felt completely devalued. I thought, if you don't care if I show up, then I am not of value to you. So take a lesson from that. Stop backfilling. If a job doesn't get done, that doesn't mean that you have to do it. It's really a tough love situation. But you could look at it positively, is that if you backfill and you fill in the jobs that they're not doing, you're not developing a leader. So there's no value in keeping them if you're having to do the work for them. To keep volunteers, you need to keep your eye on them. You need to trust but verify, check in. Next, you should model what you want. Don't talk about how hard your job is. Be a role model. Act like you want your volunteers to act. Be positive, be willing, and they will do the same. And they will feel that positive energy, and that helps keep them. If you complain about how hard it is, how nobody does anything, how you're the one doing everything, blah, 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 who wants to be a part of that organization? Set the tone. Next is to hand out a pink slip. I believe that having a bad volunteer is not better than having no volunteer at all. It's not, because they're doing work that's the image of your organization. They're representing your organization. And if they're doing a lousy job, it reflects on all of you. It's not worth it. The integrity of all of your work suffers. So why do they fail? They fail because you were not clear about the job and the expectations, the opportunity and the expectations. They didn't have the right skill set. You didn't do your homework there. They may have had the heart, but not the skill. They may have been set too far adrift. You didn't check in on as well as you should have. They may be overcommitted. And these are all realities. You can't change these factors necessarily. They're just realities. You can coach You can engage a helper for them. But the reality is you end up nagging them and then doing it yourself. So I think you need to trust your gut. You know pretty early if it's not working. You have to move them on. You have to find something more appropriate. And if you can't, that's when you tell the membership that project's on hiatus. But don't do a project badly because you have a bad volunteer running it. And last is let it go. So when I babysat my little girl, my 3-year-old granddaughter, she was all into Frozen. And you know that song, Let It Go? Let it go, let it go. So she just ran around the house for 3 days with like ribbons flinging in princess dresses, yet singing, let it go, let it go. And I thought, hey, take a lesson. Let's take a lesson. There's always going to be deadwood. There's always going to be deadwood. And sometimes we got to let it go. Next slide, please. And this is my last section, and it's real quick. The last part is volunteers thanking them. How do we thank volunteers? We've found them, we've asked them, we've kept them, and now we're thanking them. I think every article you've ever read, every workshop you've ever been to, everything you've ever seen told you about it's very important to thank volunteers. So I didn't think that I have to mention much about that. But I think what's nice is like, well, what else can you do to thank them? So I'm thinking, go beyond the newsletter and do the unexpected. Our go-to for thanking volunteers is the newsletter. And there's a place for that. You know, we write 14 paragraphs on the event and how great it was. And we bury thank yous on page 3 and paragraph 9. And then we say, oh, you know, Wendy did a great job decorating. Those plastic giraffes were just adorable. And the cookies were great. And Ramona set up all the chairs. And they were all such straight rows that Ramona did. Really a good job. And so we do all of that, and it's buried in the newsletter, and it has its place. But I think it comes across as kind of an administrative duty. And it doesn't come across quite as sincere as it might. So you should still do it, but I think you might think about doing other things. For example, don't laugh, the handwritten note, it means everything. And it's not that much work for you, or perhaps somebody you can talk into it. 2 sentences, 3 sentences, and pop it in the mail. It's all it takes. And because it's different, it's very noticeable to them. And it feels very, very personal. And the most important thing you can do with thanking volunteers is to personalize it. You can also make sure that the people who benefit from the work that your volunteer has done thanks them. Your Tech Trek girls should be writing letters to the volunteers. Those letters should be placed in the volunteers' hands. You can offer to write a letter of recommendation too. If you have a member who's still working professionally, write a nice letter of recommendation for them to put in their files. Stop in the middle when you're setting up for the next fundraiser. Stop in the middle, tell everybody to freeze, and just go around the room and say, thanks for showing up, Ramona. Thanks for Sally for showing up. Thanks for showing up. Thanks for showing up. Or hand each one of them a flower and then say, okay, unfreeze everybody back to work. It's just unexpected. Do shout outs on your social media. We forget to shout out on our social media. Another little ceremony you might think about when you have leaders who have served a long time or in an important role like your president and they're leaving, we always give them a nice president's pin that they never wear, because brooches are out these days. But anyway, another thing you can do is 2 things. One of them is called the flower ceremony. This is a really nice way to thank people. So what you do is you ask your members to bring a flower or a piece of greenery or something from their garden or Safeway. And you have each of them come up and speak to let's say it's a departing president, hand them that flower or piece of greenery and say something personal to them about why they appreciated what they did during the year. Like, I'm really grateful that you, saved us from having a tax audit, or I'm really, thank you so much for raising $10,000 in that great fundraiser that you worked on, or it can be a funny story, like it was hysterical when you dropped that whole bucket of chili at the last chili fundraiser. It was funny. It wasn't then, but I wept with you and for you, and here's a flower. So just something that they say personal to this leader who's leaving. So at the end, the leader ends up with a little bouquet of flowers, and you provide a vase, and they have this little bouquet. And I assure you, they will sit and look at that for the next week and think about what the people said who gave them that. And you can do the same thing with a little note card. and ask your members to write something on a note card, a little 4x6 card. And, maybe if they want to decorate it, and just what is some memory or story or just something they want to say thank you personally to this leader who's departing. And they come up and they read it, they give it to the leader, and then you put them all together in a scrapbook. And it's just something a little bit different. So those are just like things you can do that go beyond the newsletter. Next is catch them being good. Kind of what I was saying before. Don't just wait till the newsletter. Don't wait till the end of everything. Catch them when they're being good, like with children. So stop in the middle of the event and thank people for being there. Celebrate the small things. Look for little efforts to say thank you to. Thanks for hanging that sign. Thanks for picking up water bottles. Thanks for this. Thanks for that. Thanks for answering my email. Yay. Little things that you can just grab them for a minute and thank them for doing that in the middle of the event is really helpful. The last one, and this is my last comment here tonight. Yay. I think the most important thing that you can do to thank a volunteer is to thank by listening. This is the most important thing. You should have a volunteer feedback session regularly, lessons learned session after every project, after every event. Get those volunteers together and ask them two things. One, what went well and what didn't go well, because you will hear about that. Like, we shouldn't have put the cookies out because the speaker wasn't done and everybody went to the back to get the cookies. So we shouldn't have done that, or whatever. You're going to hear it. You're going to hear that. But what went well and what didn't go well. But the second main thing you want to ask them is, how was this for you? How did everything go okay for you? What did you enjoy about doing this? Or what problems did you have? Personalize it. Let them talk about their experience. Because the greatest thing that you can do to appreciate someone who's done something for you is to give them influence over the next one. Because when they have influence over the next one, they will volunteer the next time. So I think that that's really important. So you ask them, how did it go for you? Like, oh my God, I actually got my slides to work. I've never done a slide share presentation before. My slides work. I'm so excited. So give them a chance to remind them why they got something out of it too. So those are really important sessions that you should be having after all your projects. Next slide, please. So 15 minutes over. I'm so sorry. Anyway, I thank you for listening. And I kind of that's pretty much my wrap up. So what I usually say is just go ask somebody to have a cup of coffee. And if they run the other way because they know the secret code, then hopefully you've gotten something else out of tonight's session that you could do to bring your volunteers into your fold a little bit more. So thank you so much for listening. And I'm sorry I'm so red-faced tonight with my Rogue River sunburn. But anyway.
Well, Dawn, thank you so much. How did it go for you? How was your experience tonight?
That's awesome. I love that you said that. My experience is awesome. I'm grateful that I didn't have to share my slides, because that would have been a new learning experience for me. And I actually don't want to actually practice what I preach. So I appreciate that. I loved every minute. I love sharing these ideas. I hope that they're helpful.
And I'm going to just see if we have some questions. I know everybody's appreciative of this, but if you have a question, just raise your real hand and I will call on you. Just a couple of questions. I think I see a lot of applause here.
Thank you.
Which is always great. Questions, anyone?
I see something. I saw a comment come across the chat.
I don't see a chat.
I saw a chat comment.
Maybe it came just to you.
It was. I'm sorry. Oh, okay. Well, I'll just answer that then. It was from Pat Lehman. She asked me if I write the California newsletter, the California Connection. It's delightful. I look forward to it and I share it. Thank you. Yes, I do. I am the author of that. So thank you. And then Randa, one of your colleagues, Randa helps me compose it, put it together, and does the graphics on it. So, but I do the writing.
Great. It is really, really fun to read, informative, And I share it because I can't wait to see it every month.
Oh, my, great. Well,
She does.
great.
She shares it with the state board. I love reading it. It's great.
Oh, thanks. Well, I do write it. It's a labor of love most of the time.
So Dawn, your experience and your leadership development have clearly influenced this presentation, and I can't wait to have Nancy put it on YouTube. But Nancy, take your time. We know you're busy, because I know there are quite a few people that couldn't be here, and at least one that her Zoom wasn't working, so she had to back out. But it's just so informative. Sure, there's one or two things there that we all know, but you presented them in a very different way and made us think about them really hard. So once again, I actually even took some more notes. I took notes the first time, but I took some more tonight. So
great.
Thank you very, very much. And we thank California for being part of our online programming this year. We appreciate it.
Well, it's been, I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed getting a chance to share some of this. I know that, I talk a lot, so I better shut up.
So we especially appreciate you doing this while you're on your vacation. And we hope you have a couple more days in cool, sunny Oregon without too much smoke. How are you going back?
Through Fort Bragg.
Okay. Oh, nice. Yeah.
So that'll be nice. So we've got a couple more days there. As long as my dog doesn't vomit in the car on the way down like she did on the way up, I think it should be just fine.
That
Although
road
she ate something, I took her on a beach walk right before I came back here and set up, and she ate something very, very mysterious on the beach. I can't wait to see what it is, because I have a feeling it'll be on the hotel carpet later on tonight.
Sorry about that.
You need to check out really early and fast.
and what was that hotel you're staying in?
Yeah, so you make sure not to book it, right?
All right. Anybody, any last comments or questions? Thank you so much, Dawn. We really appreciate it. You will get a personal note, yes, and all of those things.
Yeah, I want to say, flowers and cards and notes, and actually,
but we don't have your address, so we'll have to send
and chocolate. Chocolate,
yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks again,
thank you.
Dawn.
So nice to meet you. It's nice to see you guys face to face too, after we've been talking, chatting.
And don't forget, everyone, tomorrow night, you may think you don't need to know about websites, but you really do. And Ilga has a wonderful team of people that are going to help her. And she's going to tell us the simplified version of how to really make a good website. So Ilga, we're looking forward to hearing you tomorrow night. And I think we'll have a good crowd.
Before you sign off, I would like to compliment you and the state organization for this great skills series. I shared that with our California organization. Being someone from marketing, I loved your theme and how well you stuck to the theme with everything you wrote, and very so professionally done. It's really a great summer. This whole skills program was really neat. I signed up for a couple others myself to listen in.
Great.
But it just wanted to compliment on the presentation and the packaging of it. It was really professional.
Thank you very much. It's been fun.
Dawn, you're always welcome to join our online branch. Bev is there. You can come hang out with Bev and our others on the online branch. We would love to have you join us. You get a lot out of it, I promise.
What's in it for me? What's in it for me?
You get to be part of Oregon AAUW. We rock. We're an awesome group.
I can see that.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, I'm up to my neck with state work right now. But anyway,
Well, California is well represented in the online branch. Yes, very dynamic online members.
Yeah. We're lucky we have Randa still working with us down in California too. So we're really lucky about that. So.
Thank you very much, Dawn, and enjoy the rest of your vacation.
I shall. And thank you very much, everybody.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.